Born too late to explore the Earth and too early to embark on a journey to the stars, maybe we're alive just in time to explore the ocean. Today, known by everyone, the first humans to have been in space have written their names in history, unlike those forever forgotten who were the first to cross the surface waters to dive beneath. There is no engraved, written or drawn trace, no testimony of the women and men who, most certainly since the dawn of humanity, threw themselves into the water. We've only received indirect evidence from these first dives. Heaps of shells, coral or pearls that had to be collected and brought up from the bottom of the water. Numerous relics have been discovered in tombs from distant prehistory. The mysterious, promising seas have filled our nets, fed us, drawn us in, frightened, fascinated, and carried us. Surely long before we were able to go down a few meters beneath the waves, our ancestors learned to tame the waters from their surface, using their modest boats to move around, then to fish and trade. The first sailors, braving dangers and often the unknown, brought back in their nets tales of their adventures and thousands of stories. Over time, they became exaggerated and turned into myths, frequently filled the seas with supernatural beings, goddesses, gods, and monsters to explain and protect against the unknown. The tragedies of departures and shipwrecks to give meaning to the whims of fate. Little by little on the surface, with the progress of navigation, the unknown was gradually pushed beyond the horizon. While underwater, it stayed near the shore just meters away beneath the waves' foam. For millennia, we knew almost nothing about what lies beneath the blurry surface of the worlds below. Because to venture here, the only technology we had back then was called a big gulp of air, and shadows flickered on the water's surface. The strange creatures, sometimes brought up in our nets, continued to fuel our myths and legends for centuries. In antiquity, each people had stories of sailors claiming to see fantastic and terrifying sea monsters. And the strangest thing about all this is that, nearly 2,000 years later, these myths have been replaced by the reality of discovery, by facts sometimes just as strange as the wildest of those distant fairy tales. Because over the past few decades, we've discovered that we humans are connected to the oceans much more intimately than we could have imagined. All beautiful stories have beginnings for life. It was most likely here, in the ocean, that it all began. That was nearly 3.8 billion years ago. And after spending nearly 90% of its history evolving under the waves, some ventured into the air. From our distant ancestors, who did so more than 350 million years ago. Literally living here, we still carry within us today the memory. The remnants of this aquatic past are visible during our embryonic stages, when many of our features closely resemble those of fish. We remember we descend from a long lineage among many others in Earth's evolutionary history, and above all in the seas. Around the 4th week, a human embryo develops kinds of fins that will gradually transform into toes, feet, and hands. During its 5th week, the heart of an embryo has 2 chambers, like those of fish, and on either side of the head there are gill buds that will gradually regress until they completely disappear. These anatomical features are found in all vertebrates. All of them, early on, look as alike as 2 drops of water from a sea that flows. The first 9 months of our existence, we spend them breathing, connected to a tube, immersed in an amniotic fluid whose chemical composition is strangely similar to that of seawater. Our ancestors came from and left it. Yet the oceans still flow in our veins. Our plasma, the liquid part of our blood, contains almost the same trace elements as the ocean. In fact, you could almost say that our blood is like seawater plus blood cells. And then, no matter where you are on Earth, every drop of water you drink, every breath of air you take, intimately connects you to the oceans, which, with their currents, distribute temperature, guide and control the climate. The drops that fall from the sky today, as rain or snow, were in them not long ago. They will end up tossed about, according to events in the Great Water Cycle, by a day that returns. As for the vast majority of oxygen molecules we breathe every moment, they were produced and created by marine life itself. Obviously, we haven't always known all this. To discover this, the seas had to be studied in depth, and to move from an era, antiquity, when only brave freedivers, sponge and treasure hunters were able to successfully cross the surface waters, to the ones we know. For centuries, no invention truly rivaled the feats of these divers. Able to dive to nearly 20 meters deep, carrying with them only the air stored in their lungs. Limited by how long they could stay underwater, they could only see blurry shapes and shadows with their eyes open. Like fish, these men and women were long the only ones who could venture here. Some then used barrels, large upside-down pots filled with air, to let divers refill their supply at the bottom. Staying here for a long time is still just a fantasy. There were no masks, fins or snorkels then. The first real theoretical drafts appeared about 1,800 years later. With their tubes several meters long, supposed to provide air at depth by the strength of the chest muscles alone, they are completely unusable. It's like trying to suck a golf ball through a garden hose. Because beyond 1 meter deep, no one has muscles strong enough to renew the air inside the tube, which, as it builds up, eventually becomes dangerous. In the 16th century, sailors exploring the high seas began expanding the known world. It is not uncommon to find in the accounts, or depicted on nautical maps, a mythical and remarkable fauna. Often imagined and found beyond known areas, these legendary monsters embody death, deep fears, and ignorance. Because even though the terra incognita have gradually been pushed back, the waters we sail on remain filled with mysteries. The surface forms a thick veil, beneath which, at the bottom of the dark waters, imaginary creatures lie in wait. What we know about the ocean floor remains shrouded in superstitions and assumptions, and many of our discoveries still come largely from what washes up on the beaches or is brought up in our nets. We're finally breaking through the water's surface to explore for ourselves with inventive tools. These first extended incursions owe their success to the combined existence of scientists, inventors, but also adventurers who, at times, are one and the same. The first, driven by the desire to uncover the mysteries of the laws of nature, do so by immersing themselves in the study of the behavior of the gases we breathe. They provide the latter with theoretical tools that allow them to invent tricks to stay at the bottom. Some will stay as sketches, impossible to achieve. Others will be built and tested by adventurers, just curious people daring to get wet or hotheads. Thus, we begin to see increasingly sophisticated diving bells appear, as well as machines meant to supply air at depth. And step by step, fin by fin, through repeated attempts, we begin to lift the veil and see things a little more clearly. In 1715, a large wooden barrel appeared with a glass porthole and two watertight, leather-sleeved holes for arms. This is the very first diving machine that is truly functional. Here, there's no air supply. Everything you can breathe is with you from the start, inside the barrel. With this strange barrel, you can stay nearly 30 minutes at a depth of 20 meters. The same year, the first waterproof suit was invented, connected to the surface by two hoses supplied with air by a bellows. 60 years later, people began to see the possibility of actually walking on the seafloor. Under a helmet made by a coppersmith and connected to an air tank on the back, equipped with heavy lead soles to prevent floating back up like a cork, Fremini was among the first to walk underwater. His invention lets him stay 30 minutes at a depth of 5 meters. 2 years later, the first attack submarine is launched. Made of wood and not very maneuverable, it nearly sank itself more than once. Soon, helmeted diving suits would follow one after another. They usually had portholes and received air from a surface piston pump operated by several people. Even to go underwater alone, you still needed a team above water. Then came inventions that provided a bit of autonomy, equipped with a compressed air tank whose continuous flow had to be regulated with a valve. In 1832, Condor became the first diver to walk on the East River's bottom at 6 meters deep after successfully testing his invention. A few minutes later, the rupture of the hose supplying the thin stream of air made him the first known death in the world of autonomous diving. Many of these ingenious inventions in their time were often hard to handle, and danger lurked at the slightest failure. Whether he came here driven by curiosity, the need to feed his family by doing dangerous work underwater, or by the lure of profit in search of treasures. Many who ventured here paid a heavy price. But through trial and error and perseverance, the pioneers of the worlds below are beginning to have reliable and functional helmeted diving suits. And there you have it, able to deliver air without needing to turn a valve, the very first regulator. What inspired Jules Verne and Captain Nemo's gear in 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. 8 years later, after about 10 minutes of rest, the very first underwater photo is taken. The adaptation of the human body to great depths is beginning to be better understood, and the pioneers of autonomous diving eventually managed to find a certain balance. When the very first bathysphere, simply attached to the end of a cable, descends to more than 900 meters. From their cramped cockpit, protected by a cast iron shell nearly 4 centimeters thick, the two intrepid inventors struggled to make out anything in the near-total darkness surrounding them. With only a single bulb inside the cockpit as their sole source of light, they are reduced to peering through their 7-centimeter quartz porthole, watching the passage of a few waves. They will see many. Strange things and life have made their home down there, and now diving, accessible to everyone, is no longer just a dream. Cousteau and Gagnon have created a reliable, efficient regulator that will impress its first users. He glides toward the depths, aware of living in harmony with an environment very different from the atmosphere where I have my habits as a land mammal. I swim almost effortlessly up, down, left, right, like the fish I encounter. I breathe without thinking about it. Alone, the device's faint hum reminds me I'm underwater. An unexpected guest to the spell of the sea, enchanted by this splendor, this silence, this harmony. 17 years have passed again, and after a little less than 4 hours sinking toward the deepest point of the ocean, two men settle aboard their bathyscaphe. At the Mariana Trench's bottom, 10,911 meters deep. Where no light reaches, in one of Earth's harshest environments, under pressures about 1,100 times higher than at the surface. And while the water temperatures outside are close to freezing, the two men glance through the porthole and see a flatfish swim by. Over the following decades, even though we had long thought that no life was possible in the deep sea, we eventually discovered, buried deep in the dark depths of sunless realms, oases of life were found that challenged what we thought we knew about living things. Near hot springs several thousand meters deep, there is more life per square meter than in tropical rainforests. To this day, barely 10% of the seafloor located beyond 200 meters deep has been accurately mapped. In other words, we know the surface of some planets in the solar system in more detail than we know the ocean floor, where during the 20th century tens of thousands of active volcanoes were discovered, as well as a mountain range like no other, located under the seas and stretching for nearly 65,000 kilometers. Today, we know of about 200,000 different species of marine animals, an astonishing number and yet a modest one at the same time, when you consider the fact that it's estimated that only 10% of all marine life is known to us. There may be nearly 2 million different species of animals currently living in the oceans, still waiting to be discovered. Evolving relatively freely underwater, like clumsy fish, castaways, floating, drifting, tossed around like messages in a bottle. We unknowingly inherit the legacy of countless inventors before us. And they allowed us, through ingenious technologies, to somewhat substitute for the use of gills, to invite us here to study, film, or simply enjoy the pleasure of observing those who live here. Unless it's the other way around. Going back in time, all the way to distant prehistory, all these advances, these discoveries, take us back to those who, for the first time, crossed the mirror of the surface waters. To cross over like Alice to the other side and discover an ocean of promises, filled to the brim with new things, forgotten things, and also things we simply thought had disappeared. In South Africa, in 1938, a fisherman pulled up from his nets a deep-sea fish, a living fossil, the coelacanth, which was thought to have been extinct for more than 65 million years. Off the coast of Australia, in 2006, during a campaign to survey marine life, a species of shrimp was found that was thought to have disappeared for 50 million years. Today, just like before, most people live close to the oceans. Roughly half the world's population lives within 100 kilometers of the coast. Yet we still remain largely ignorant of the mysteries of the sea. Consider that giant squids, with their length of nearly 10 meters and eyes as large as a soccer ball, are the largest invertebrates on the planet, but also the least known. We didn't have concrete proof of their existence until the 19th century, and helped turn them from myth into reality for us. For 150 years, all observed specimens have been dead, stranded on beaches, or found in pieces in sperm whales' stomachs. No one had ever immortalized a living one in its natural habitat before 2004, when the first one was photographed. 16 years later, we only have 2 videos, each just a few seconds long, of these legendary creatures moving in the deep ocean. The vast deep oceans can hide secrets for ages. Enough to finally convince us that there may be something hidden beneath the surface of the water in the world below. As many treasures waiting to be discovered as there are in all the natural history museums on the planet. This ambitious project wouldn't exist without you. Without everyone on Tipeee, Utip or Kiss Kiss Bank Bank who gave us money and support. Nor without the Rubicon diving team, who knew the sunken museum like the back of their hand. We make all these bubbles just for you.